Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Career Chat. I'm Krista Harmon, one of the career readiness consultants with the Kent Intermediate School District here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I'm really excited to have Andrea Jordan with us today. She's a third grade educator in a Spanish immersion program. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you.
So glad you're here. And I know there's many young people out there who want to be teachers when they grow up, and they'd love to hear your story today to give them insights into how this journey might be. So take us back to when you were 16 or 17, Andrea. Did you think you'd grow up to be a teacher? What were you thinking back then?
I was having trouble deciding what I wanted to do. My mom wanted me to be a teacher. I wanted to go into school and study something related to agriculture because my dad is a farmer. But I grew up in Guatemala, so it was a little different than it is here, in the sense that when you go to college there, you either have to have like enough money to pay for school, or you're gonna have to work and go to school part-time. So my parents wanted me to do something that I could get a job right away. So kind of like training school. So I did that, and I chose teaching just because that's what I was most familiar with, but that is not what I wanted. But it seemed like the most
Kind of practical
I
or
don't know,
straightforward thing?
practical like thing to do, the like smartest thing to do, I guess. So I did that. And then after that, I wanted to go to college for social work, thinking that what I wanted to do was to work with adoptions, especially with international adoptions. So I came to the US and I went to college for social work. I did my 4 years, had internships that somehow were tied to children and education. But I was like, I am not going to be a teacher. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life in a classroom. And then after my 4 years, I graduated the year that COVID was new, and it was a lot of like uncertainty. So I didn't know what to do. Social work jobs are not super well paid, and there was a huge demand on like government programs and other programs that were around to help people with COVID, but it was really hard to get jobs. So I knew somebody who knew about the job that I currently have, and they reached out to me because they knew I had some background experience with children in schools. And they told me about this position, and they said, you should apply. And I felt like I didn't have all the qualifications for the job. So I was a little scared to apply for a job that I wasn't qualified for. But I still did. And I was told by some people around me that I had skills that were not listed necessarily in the application, but that could be helpful for the job. And
Yeah.
I applied, I got the job, and here I am. I love my job, and even though it's not what I thought I would do when I was 16, I went backtrack to it, and I think that this is what I'm going to do for at least a few years now.
I love that about career journeys, because so many, I just met a young man the other day. He would never have done teaching as a young person, but now he went to be a social worker first, and now he's back teaching too, because his parents were teachers. He just wanted to not be a teacher, and then it had the skill sets that he wanted. So when you think back that you picked teaching as a training school, like you said, you had other choices, but that one seemed most practical, or there's something about it that drew you in. Why did you think that teaching wasn't going to be a good fit for you back then? What do you remember being some of those biases against it? You're like, no, I don't want to do that. That now turned out to be not true.
A lot of it, honestly, was I don't want to be like my mom. I don't want to do the same things that my parents, like that my mom did. It just doesn't feel right to do this just because that's what somebody else did. But I think that was the like biggest like reason. I kind of like the rebellious 16-year-old me not wanting to do what I was told to do. And I wanted to try something that was different, something that I was not familiar with necessarily.
And I think young people watching this are going to relate to that. I've heard that story, and sometimes it's really, I don't know if it's genetics, but teachers do beget teachers. That is something that happens in families, that there's skill sets or values that seem to be a good fit for their kids too. And so it is wonderful to hear that you found your passion kind of going through the direction then kind of backwards. So you went off to college to be a social work, and you had the idea of being in international adoptions, and that's what sounded really great to you. Tell us about that interest. Why was that on your radar at the time?
So as I said, I grew up in Guatemala, and there's a lot of like orphanages there, and I had the opportunity to work at one, and it was like a really humbling experience for me, and I just realized the need for kids to have a family. I was very privileged to have a supportive and like really like good to me family. So I really wanted other children to have that same opportunity. And it's not really part of Guatemalan culture to adopt necessarily. So I wanted to do international adoptions because adoptions from Guatemala are currently closed, and it was my dream to like help open that up, because I think it's better for children to have a family than to be in an orphanage and grow up without one.
Yeah. So when you think about your current role, you're in a Spanish immersion program. Have you found some of those things to now carry over? Some of that wanting kids to have a safe parental, guiding factors in their lives, that now you get to do that as a teacher? Is that some of what's connecting with you now? Why do you think it's such a good fit now that you found it?
I think it is. I think that I always had that passion for children, even if I didn't want to like work with children in a classroom. But I do see myself using some of that passion in that thinking of like everyone needs a family, by me creating a healthy and safe environment in my classroom for all of my children, like a place where they feel like heard and supported and cared for.
Your students are so fortunate that that's your mindset, every day. I love that. And I think that's important for young people who are watching this, is to understand transferable skills. Something that you do in one area can certainly be in another occupation as well. And sounds like that's what you found. When you think back to your internships and even getting your social work degree, what are some of those skill sets that ended up paying off for you very much so now, even though you didn't have a teaching certificate at the time? What are some of those things that did move with you that helped open up this opportunity?
I think that just giving new things a try, and learning how to ask for help when you don't know what to do. Um, that is something I had to like learn during like high school and college, and still like carried over to my job, because I came to my job and I didn't really know how to make lesson plans or how to handle behavior problems. So I have like a really supportive like community of coworkers, so I can ask for help and guidance when I need it. But also just trying really hard in asking the questions that need to be asked. Sometimes it's kind of scary and embarrassing to ask questions if you don't know something, but if you don't ask, you're still not gonna know. And then it's harder to get where you want to be.
It's such great advice from a career mentor, because I think a lot of young people have expressed to me, like, how will I know how to do that job? Like, and you don't learn everything in college. And even for you, like you said, you got this job and you hadn't been taught some of those basics that teacher education would have taught you. And people are helpful, like you said. You have a great support system there. So young people, if you're hearing that, don't be afraid to ask questions. It's how we learn our jobs.
Yeah.
So
And someone might not be willing to like help, but then there's like more people that will be glad to walk the walk with you.
Yeah, have you
So
had people
don't get shut down by the one time that you asked and you didn't get what you needed.
have you had that happen?
Not necessarily in this position, but sometimes, like people have lives and they're busy, or their schedules just don't match with you, and it's just harder. So
Yeah. I'd love for you, I know that all of us have gone through school and we've all been in an elementary classroom as students, but I'd like to help young people understand there's probably more to it, maybe break out some of those myths about teaching. So tell us what a typical day is like for you, and maybe something you'd want young people to know that you didn't really know when you were a student, or that has still continued to surprise you now that you're in this role.
Something that continues to surprise me in this job is that my work never ends. If I work 2 hours, it's almost the same as if I work 27 hours in a row. A typical day, I come into the classroom at 7 a.m. My kids get here at 8:10. Then we start the day by just reading something, like a message in the morning, and then they have morning work that they need to do, and then we go into or different subjects. We do everything in Spanish except for social studies and a couple other things, but for the most part, we speak Spanish all day long. Then students go to their special classes depending on the day, and they go home at 3:10. And then I stay in prep for the next day until like 4:30 usually. Sometimes I stay here until like, I don't know, 8:30, but that's also in part because I don't have a family or any other responsibility, and I really like my job.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, it'll take as much time as you let it.
Yeah.
Because it never ends, for sure. So I think that's something maybe young people don't understand, is that you do have to prep all the different subjects that you're going to have during the day. How does a person even manage that? Like, tell us about how much the curriculum helps you, or how much you have to kind of figure out on your own. Any general guidance you'd like to give or help young people with expectations around that?
So the expectations are pretty high of like all the things that you have to teach. My math book is probably like this thick, and I only have 1 hour for math every day. So I basically have to, especially me, since I didn't like really learn how to teach math, I have to go through the lesson and figure it out. What are some of the like most important parts, and think about activities or worksheets or any like resources that we're going to use, collect those and have them ready for the next day. For reading, I have to look at what the goals for the unit are, and then think about the order of the lessons and like where my kids are at, to see if I need to like rearrange the order of like lessons or slow down or move a little bit faster. But it like I can't really plan what I'm gonna do in like 10 days ahead, because everything changes in a second in a classroom. So you have to be flexible, and you have to leave some room for change when you plan.
Yeah, and I think that's important when young people are watching these, to kind of self-assess. Some people like a lot of structure. They maybe aren't as comfortable with things changing all the time. So again, that's what they need to be listening for. Because I think some people think that it can be very routine all the time, and that is good for some people's personalities. But it sounds like there's still a need for flexibility, even within the school structure.
Yeah. I really like structure, but I also like the variety of things that I get to do in the classroom. So just like knowing that I have like a schedule and specific like times and days where I need to do things feels good, but also there is a flexibility of like, oh, that this didn't happen on this day or at this time, then I can move it to a different time or date.
Yeah. You had
It
mentioned
really
that,
is what you want to make it.
absolutely, because it sounds, just by the bulletin board behind you, there's definitely a place for creativity there.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads me into the next question. You had mentioned that someone had reached out to you about this position because they knew you had some qualities or interested in or experiences with children. What kind of qualities do make an effective teacher? What do you think they saw in you that you were able to get this position without the teaching training?
I knew Spanish, first of all, and I had experience working at a school abroad in Ghana a couple years during college. And then I also did some educational planning for the African American Museum in DC. So I had separate experience that if you put them together, you like do use those transferable skills, then they're like applicable to teaching, because I had done like teacher aiding, and I had done teacher planning before.
Yeah, I love that. And I want young people to pay attention to that she had done some very concrete experiences around being with kids and teaching them. She was a teacher's aide in Ghana, and then that planning. So you sought out an opportunity with your education during those internships. What would you recommend for maybe young people doing while they're even at the high school level to even start to kind of put their toe into it to see if this is a good fit for them? Anything that maybe you would have done differently or could have done?
So I did this many years ago when I was in high school. I came and I shadow at this school that I'm currently working at. I never thought I would come back, and I never like dream of even working here. But the person who reached out to me was the teacher that I used to help in her class. So she had seen me and she knew who I was and how I was with children and how like passionate I was about education. So she knew that I had some experience working with children somewhere else too, and I had a like college degree. So just building those relationships with people that are working on things that you're interested in is really helpful.
That's gold right there. We try to talk about that in these chats, the networking. Someone had a great saying that says, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And that's true for this, right? She knew you, she had observed you, she saw your passion, your interaction, and that is how you got another job. And so young people, you never know who you're gonna meet. Always be presenting your best self.
Yeah.
So what do you think about your job? You said you love it. What are some of your favorite things about your current role? And so what are some of the challenges? Help young people know that there are some in those situations too.
Some of my favorite things, well, especially the children, but I just love my third graders are really like silly and they love jokes and pranks. And it brings them so much joy that I use that as part of like my classroom and my teaching. And they like really enjoy it, and it makes their learning more engaging. So I just try to use things that they like to like kind of like weave them into what I teach.
Give me an example.
So last year I had a big bear, like a big teddy bear, and we couldn't really get together with other classes because of COVID and all the restrictions. So for Halloween, they all had this plan of like how somebody was gonna bring a blanket, somebody was gonna bring like a piece of rope. And like I just love their planning and like their excitement to do things. So we covered the big bear with like a blanket, and it was basically a ghost. And during recess time, we went to another classroom and sat in the teachers' like chairs. So when the kids would come into that classroom, they would just be pranked. So it's just fun to do silly things, and it's just like not very usual in a school. So they really enjoy it, and I get such like joy out of it too.
I can tell your smile is so big. It's so great. And those are things that you hold close to you going when the things get tough, right? So what are some of those things about your job that you're like, man, I love these kids, but this is tough?
Sometimes it's frustrating when you don't get like the response you want to get from parents. I mean, as I said before, families are really important to me. I want them to be as involved as possible, but that's not always the case, and that can be frustrating. And you just keep trying to do your best in the classroom and manage what you can when you have the children. Behavior problems are also hard to deal with. I have like a rule in my classroom that like there's no trouble. Like if my students can make a plan of like how they can like make things better. So just trying to like come up with ideas of like how to work with behavior and like problem solving in the classroom. And I think that can be challenging. I don't go through that here, but during my time teaching in Ghana, it was really hard to get resources like pencils and papers and all that stuff. I was in a pretty like remote area, so it's not like I could just go to Michael's or any of those big stores to get school materials. So that can be challenging too if you work for a school district that does not have as much resources.
Yeah, my husband's a second grade educator. I know that we've bought many, many school supplies out of our own pockets over the years, for sure. But he wouldn't change it either. He wants his students to have what they need, for sure. Sometimes in schools, Andrea, we work with young people on soft skills or employability skills, things like communication and teamwork. And what are some things that you've noticed about your role and why students should pay attention to that and why that's really important? Tell me how communication is important, for example, or problem solving or teamwork.
So I work with a team of 3 other third grade teachers. One of them teaches Spanish immersion and 2 of them teach English, but we teach basically the same curriculum. So our children, if they were all put together in a room at the end of the year, should be at the same like spot. But in order for us to do that, because we are very different, the 4 people are just very different. And the way that we teach and the things that we do in the classroom are different, but their kids' goals are the same. So it's really important for us to communicate. And we also have like a teaching schedule that we need to like follow. So communicating about where we are and like how we're doing is really important. And for me, it has been really important too, because they have much more experience than I do. Just so I get to ask questions and they get to share about their experience. Or because I'm also new, I see things differently and I can also share my ideas. And sometimes they're like, oh, we didn't think about that. But, that's what happens when you share your ideas and communicate with the people you work with.
No, I love that practicality of it and that you're not necessarily in your own classroom every day, day in, day out. I think that might be one of those myths about teaching. Is there anything else that you want young people to know that might be a myth about education? And then we'll have you use your iPad. You thought you might want to share what your classroom looks like.
Teachers don't get as much vacation as some people think. We get days off, but my students get a lot of days off, but a lot of those days I'm doing professional development. And even if it's a snow day, I'm probably grading papers and reading over my kids' work at my house. So it's not just like come to school from like 7 through 4 and then you're done. You're always thinking about your students. You're always thinking about the things that they're struggling with or the things that they're doing well. And yeah, I don't know. For me, it's really hard to turn off my brain and like disconnect from my kids that need me and need to learn.
Yeah, that's definitely something young people have to understand is that when you have these 25 babies of your own, you don't get to put it on a shelf. That's just not how this particular occupation works, right?
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing your heart on that. We have about 5 minutes left, Andrea, and I know I'm going to have you share a word of wisdom. Is there anything you'd like to show us around your classroom?
Sure, I can just show you. I can just show you around my classroom. So here. So here it's all the art supplies that they can't use for free time. We have a lot of like books, some library, some math like games, like there's the board, more library books. Then my students get to choose if they want to sit with a team or if they want to sit on their own. And I like to change the seats every couple of weeks. We have like flexible sitting for the students that really need to like move and benefit from not sitting in a chair. And we just have a bunch of like cushions in a corner where they can just hang out or do any of their jobs. This is usually my desk and it's pretty empty at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, and it's full of things at the end of the day because my students just bring me too many things.
I love it. And your room's beautiful and you can tell there's lots of love and care that goes into making that such a nice environment for them. That's so wonderful. Obviously there's, I don't know if young people realize this, but there's a teacher shortage out there. There's less young people going into that particular occupation. Why don't you give us in these last few minutes a sales pitch? Why should young people consider this? I mean, you've given some good reasons, but. Why should they do it?
I think that children are really important, and I think that educated children are very important. So I don't know, the more like caring teachers that the world has, the better the world will be, because you really have a chance in the classroom to impact children who will impact the world. And you really have a chance to make a positive impact that will just carry over through the kids' life and life performance. So yeah, if you're like me, that you want to do something that will change the world or will really have an impact in the world, I think that teaching is the one thing that you can do, because you get to shape children and you get to teach them the things that um, are important in the world, and not necessarily teach them, but like help them think about it and come up with their own opinions and uh, thoughts about what matters and what's important and what they can do to make the world a better place.
Yeah, and I think that's something that more young people need to hear, those reasons, Andrea, and I appreciate you sharing that, because sometimes they get caught up in, well, teachers don't make a lot of money, or, you know, but they have summers off. You know, there's all these particular reasons why people would or wouldn't go into teaching. But changing someone's life, that's a pretty big reason. Do you cry at the end of the year when your babies get done with third grade?
I do.
Yeah.
I still cry for the kids that I had to let go last year. I was just not ready for it. But it's just I really like invest in building long lasting relationships. So my kids from last year are still in the building and they come visit me, and like they know my new students, and it's just kind of like a chicken and not like a hen and all like her chicken, and that they come back to yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. My husband's a big 6'2" guy, and he teaches second grade. And sure enough, it gets him every year, because you've had the whole school year more time with your students than the parents probably have with their own kids, right? And you get attached.
Yeah.
So
You really do get to know them.
yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Final word of wisdom, Andrea. What would you like young people to hear from you, or the school counselors who might be watching today?
Um, don't don't be afraid to try a new job or a new thing. Like if you're unsure about it, but you feel like maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, you should try it. Your first job or your choice, a certain point doesn't have to be a life choice necessarily. I thought when I got this job, I'm just gonna try it. Like I need a job. This is what I have. This is what I'm being offered. I'm gonna take it and like just try to make the best out of it. And then I ended up like loving it. But that's what I did during college too. Like I took internships just because I wanted to have an internship and that was available to me. And I was like, this is not necessarily what I want to do for the rest of my life, but I won't know what it's like until I try it.
That's a great way to end our career chat, because that is gold advice. Just try it, move forward. You're never going to know if it's the right thing for you unless you try it. So I love it. And that education's never wasted. You got a degree in social work, but it's totally transferable into what you're doing. And you have this beautiful toolkit of all these beautiful skills and talents that you can use to make the world a better place. So Andrea, thank you for spending time with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.